Hi there again, welcome to Module 4, Lesson 2. In this lesson, we'll focus on the procedure or process your students will go through every single time they finish watching a set of your video notes. We've already established what they are writing on as they watch, but there are important things you need to know immediately or shortly after they've watched. Not to mention, to help students to be successful in your flipped classroom, you absolutely have to have a procedure for holding students accountable for watching your videos. So let's consider some options and recommendations here. This lesson really has two parts to it. Both will be in this video, but are structured around the two things you want to know about students once they've watched a particular video. So you'll learn that it's important to know they, in fact, took those notes and what their retention levels are. And finally, how to assess each of those important pieces of information. So let's get to it. The first process you want to set up in your flipped classroom is one that allows you to determine if in fact each of your students took the notes. Now, there is no foolproof way to make sure they both watched the video and took notes, but there are ways to assess those separately and no one right way to do it, so I'll give some suggestions for both. To know if they took the notes and if they are quality, informative notes, my recommendation is that you set up a system that allows you to see every student's notes every time they take a set of notes, even for your high-performing AP students. Let me explain my system to see if this is something that can work for you. I'm going to explain the system in full here, so bear with me, but also know that this explanation is in the PDF guide of this lesson as well. With this system, I wanted a way to A, look at student notes, and B, hold students accountable for taking those notes without making their grade too inflated by them. So here's the process. Students would come to class. Each day they had a set of notes due and turn to them in their binder. I had a prompt on the board that was related to the notes, and they had the time it took me to stamp the room to discuss or follow those directions. As they were discussing, I walked the room with a fun little stamp and ink pad, looking at every student's notes. They would turn the page if it was more than one. Most of my sets of notes were one front and back, some were two though, and stamp the top right corner of each page I was looking at. I was looking for quality notes taken by that student, not just one-line answers or minimal writing. I was looking for evidence that their brain was working through the information and their hands helped them by drawing out what their brain was thinking. A side note really quickly, I also stamped in-class activities. This allowed me to look at all their work without having piles to collect and grade. I told my students often and on a regular basis that their work was not important because I graded it as if I were paying them. It was about the process of them obtaining the information, talking it out with their classmates and me, then getting feedback on their test. P.S. That's very upper level, and I very much walked them through that framework of making connections between their work and effort and their test multiple times throughout the school year. Stamping in-class work also made sure that absent students were held accountable for the work they missed in class. And only stamping it made sure to not, again, inflate their grades. Each stamp, by the way, was worth 1 point in their binder grade, which I graded once per unit. So we would go through a unit, stamping notes, any reading guides, and especially those in-class activities. That could mean I stamped a couple or even few things each day, so that really provided ample time for bell ringers. Then, at the end of each unit, on review days as part of one of the review day stations, or on test days, I collected the binders. Now, I say I collected with quotation marks because I had students put their binders on an empty table, so I didn't have to walk the room. You can call it lazy if you want. I like to call it optimizing my energy as a teacher. And then I graded and returned the binders, and get this, in one class period. Ain't nobody got time or the space for collecting and sifting through binders for 4 classes of AP Psych for more than one class period. Plus, to me, that is an awful return on my time investment. What does collecting those binders and looking at them again do for students? In my classroom, nothing. So I didn't. So how did I make that grading process go fast? I used a Google form. In the PDF guide of this lesson, be sure to go to the link that is a Google form you can use if you'd like. I simply made a space in that Google form for me to enter each student's bell, name, and then a question to enter how many points they got for their binder in each of the categories I quickly assessed. Then I split the screen with the spreadsheet from the Google form with my online grading book, and bam, grades were entered the same day. Now, to clarify, the Google form I used was for my purposes only. My students never saw that Google form or the spreadsheet of results. If I needed to make any comments that I wanted students or parents to read, I would either talk to the student about it as I finished grading their binder, or I would type those comments into the Google form, then copy and paste them in the comment section of our online gradebook. The second data point you want to collect in your flipped classroom is students' retention immediately after or even while they watch the notes. There are so many options you can go with here on how to do this. One of them being a very traditional system of quizzing the next day when they walk into class, or even doing pop quizzes. But I'm talking about an even more immediate formative assessment. I have 2 tools to recommend using for this purpose. I have mentioned this tool before, but now I want to really get specific on deciding if this platform is for you. PlayPosit and other similar tools like Edpuzzle allow you to upload a video from YouTube into the site and embed quiz questions within the video. It will stop the video and allows you to determine if the students can move on or not, having answered the questions incorrectly. Then you'll see students' responses to those questions in real time. It even shows you how long the student took to watch the video. This is fantastic, can't argue with data. If a student isn't doing well on tests in your class and they or their parents come to you wanting to know what they're doing wrong, bam, you've got that data that shows they aren't doing due diligence in watching videos or are not investing their undivided attention enough to retain the information from the video, even enough to answer the questions correctly on the quiz questions in the video. Now, I have a quick caution for you. If you have spent time building your Google site for your flipped classroom that we focused on in the last module, and will be putting your YouTube videos into that Google site, you're going to have to detour from that route because PlayPosit videos have to be watched on PlayPosit, where the students are logged in order for you to see that data. There's no embedding those PlayPosit notes elsewhere. In my mind, this means that a flipped classroom home, like a Google site, is null and void. PlayPosit would then best be paired with a tool like Google Classroom or some other immediate learning management system that's more of a feed or class stream. Of course, how you use these tools is entirely up to you, but I like to not have too many moving parts in different areas. So I try to go all in and on as few tools as possible that make up my classroom toolbox. If you don't feel it necessary to have the instant feedback that a tool like PlayPosit can provide, or you want to push your students a bit in retaining the information, or even have higher level students that would make this other option ideal, then consider this option. A formative assessment tool like Google Quizzes, one that is a standalone quiz that you can embed or link in your flipped classroom home like a Google site, would pair nicely with the structure you're building so far. So on your Google site, you'll put your YouTube videos right there for students to watch without them ever leaving your site. Then right underneath the video, you can embed the Google form students need to fill out after having watched the video. You could also put the video and Google form side by side in your Google site. That may be easier for their viewing and to see the questions as they go along. The caveat here is that it's slightly less immediate than what would be in a PlayPosit video or Edpuzzle. But to me, a Google form, something that they fill out immediately after watching the video, is still rather immediate. And here's the big one for me. It's fewer places to go for your students in that you have one home for your flipped classroom, and that is probably your Google site. Their video is there, and then right underneath it is the link or the embedded Google quiz that they need to fill out. And that makes it pretty foolproof. In the last slide, I mentioned that you could put the Google quiz on your site right next to or under your video, which means students will have full access to that whenever they want it, at home, with access to the World Wide Web. Need I say more? Because of the nature of that formative assessment, that's really all it can be, an assessment that informs your instruction, not one that is included in a student's grade. This is also why this type of formative assessment in my flipped classroom was short and very lower level thinking, making sure students got the basics from the video. Then I used what I called topic quizzes. This is more of the traditional quizzing, in class and counted as a grade. I don't mention this here so that you model your class after mine exactly, but so that you consider what will make up your students' grades in your flipped classroom. As I've mentioned throughout this lesson, there are 2 points of data you want to be collecting from your students: if they take the notes and what their retention is after they've watched the videos. But really, there should be 3 points of data before you get to that unit test. Again, I called these topic quizzes, and they are ones that counted for a grade. Because I didn't count the formative assessments as a grade, these topic quizzes certainly did. These topic quizzes, along with vocab quizzes and unit tests, made up the majority of a student's grade in my class. Some might say that puts too much emphasis on tests, but in my flipped classroom, and here's where I really want you to hear me, the scaffolding and systems I put in place justified the grade makeup being as such. I supported students during the note-taking process and assessed them at 2 points before they even took the test, so that both the student and I knew leading up to the test what areas they needed to work on. Nothing was in the dark. No student could say they didn't know what was going to be on the test in my class because it was all laid out in black and white. These systems are what support student learning in your flipped classroom, so I really want you to take some time to reflect on and proactively plan for what's going to work best in your flipped classroom, helping your students to be successful. We are already halfway through Module 4, which is the close or conclusion of Phase 2 of the flipped classroom formula, where we're focusing on the content of your flipped classroom. A huge aspect of that is determining what that content will mean to your students, meaning how to best hold them accountable for that work. And I hope you see by this point that just saying, it'll be on the test, is not setting your students up for success. So your take action piece for this lesson focuses on just that, deciding how you'll hold students accountable. So you'll want to consider the options of holding your students accountable for taking their notes that I've mentioned in these slides. Then start creating that content, videos in PlayPosit or quizzes in Google Forms. And then finally, determine the weight, what weight your video notes and formative assessments will have in your students' grades. So in this lesson, you learned the 2 points of data you want to be collecting in your flipped classroom. Did they take the notes? And then their retention levels after. You also learned about tools to help you effectively collect that data. And then you'll have learned about determining what that data and the content of your course means to your students, how to hold them accountable. So in the next lesson, you're going to learn, what about when students don't take the notes on time? That's such a common question about the flipped classroom, and I want to make sure that we are being very open, overt, and intentional on how we're addressing that common issue in the flipped classroom. So when you're ready, go ahead and click next, and I'll catch you in lesson 3.